Welcome to our YouTube channel, Binary Bulls. Just a quick background on us. We are two brothers who are software engineers by trade and got introduced to trading after the whole crypto and Bitcoin frenzy. We started off as an option traders and now switched to future trading. We want to document our journey to becoming profitable traders and share it with everyone so that we can learn, struggle, and succeed together. In this series, we will leverage our software engineering background and apply it to trading. By the end, we will develop multiple algorithmic trading strategies, backtest, and forward test them to find out which strategy is the most profitable one. The chart you see here in the screen is after we connected to the trader workstation and pulled ES data until January 31st of 2025. In this video, we are going to learn on how exactly we can do that. While we will be using ES throughout the series, the same approach applies to other future indices like NQ, CL, and more. Here's what you can expect in the whole series. We'll learn how to connect to the TWS API and pull historical index data, learn about most commonly used key technical indicators and code them into our chart here, backtest and forward test some of the most commonly used trading strategies, compare profitability factors to refine and develop our ultimate strategy. Stay tuned as we dive deep into algorithmic trading. Now let's set up our trading environment. I'll walk you through how to install Interactive Broker's Trader Workstation. I'll show you how to connect to the TWS API and show you how to pull historical data for indices for this series. And for this series, we are using ES. Keep in mind this data isn't real time. It's delayed by about 15 to 20 minutes, but for now that's perfectly fine for backtesting our strategies. Once we have a fully built strategy, we'll move on to forward testing with real-time data, which requires a small subscription fee. Before installing TWS, we need to open an IKBR brokerage account. To open an account, you just visit their website and come here, click on open an account, start application, and it'll give you create a username and password. Just create your username and password and start your application. You'll need your personal information, your income tax and residency information on your trading experience and objectives, bank account information, and after everything is filled out, you can just submit the application. Once the application is submitted, it'll take 5 to 7 days to set up your account. Scroll all the way to the bottom, find software and downloads, and click Trader Workstation. Here you'll see different TWS software. We are going to be using the offline version of the TWS, and we are going to be using the latest one. Click on the offline TWS latest. I'm using Mac, so I have two options: Mac OS with Intel processor and Mac OS with Apple Silicon. Mine is Apple Silicon OS, so I'm going to be downloading the Apple Silicon version. Once the download is complete, install your Trader Workstation on your computer. Once the installation is complete, you'll see a screen where it'll ask you for a login username and a password. You need to use your IKBR brokerage login name and password. Once you enter, you'll see this screen. Don't worry about any of the layouts. We won't be using any of the charts, any of the other functionalities, so just use a default layout. We don't need to tweak some of the settings, so click on File, go to Global Configurations, General. All of these are going to be checked by default, so just leave it as it is. API, go to API and then go to Settings. We need to check Enable ActiveX and Socket Clients. We need to enable Read-Only API so that we have only read-only access and don't accidentally execute a live trade. We need to ensure that socket port number is 7496. This is where the TWS API is going to be listening. We need to check the create API message log for our API logs, and also allow connection from localhost, because we'll be using our localhost for establishing the connection to TWS API. Once everything is complete, just click on apply and OK. Now, before we start coding, we'll need two essential tools. VS Code as our code editor. You can use other editors, but VS Code is our preference. You also need Python. We'll use Python as our programming language. You can use other programming languages such as Java, C++, but Python is more beginner friendly, so we're going to be using Python in this series. And don't worry, if you don't have these tools yet, I'll link their website in the description where you can go and download them, and also you'll have tons of YouTube videos where they'll teach you how to set up Python or VS Code for your computer.
Now that everything is set up, let's connect our local machine to the IKVR data feed. This is where things start to get really interesting. First, I'll open terminal. I'll change the directory to desktop, so cd desktop. Next, I'll create a folder named Algo-Trading for our project. So make directory Algo-Trading. I'll navigate inside the newly created Algo-Trading folder. In this folder, I'm going to open up VS Code, our code editor. Now that we are inside the VS Code, I'm going to open up the terminal. Before writing any code, I'll create a virtual environment so that we can organize and separate dependency from other projects. In order to do that, I'm going to type in python -m-venv. So we're going to use Python module called venv to create a virtual environment called venv. A folder in our project called venv is created. Next, I'll activate the virtual environment using source venv /bin/activate. Now, if I run pip list, I can see that we started with fresh Python virtual environment, and if I need to install any other packages, I can just do pip install. Let's say I want to install numpy, then I'll do pip install numpy. Then this numpy package is installed inside our virtual environment. We can see that we are inside virtual environment by looking at this one, venv tag. Once we install numpy, this package is pulled into our local project. So if I go into venv library and the site packages, I can see that numpy has been installed. Now, if I do pip list, I should be seeing the numpy package. There we go.
Let's create a Python notebook. In order to do that, I'm going to go to the terminal, type in touch, name of the notebook, data, download IBAPI dot IPy, hit enter. It's going to create IPynb notebook file. Just go to it and hit code to open up the cell. We're going to be importing some of the packages. Let me just copy and paste here for time's sake. So a couple of things that we're importing are IPAPI and pandas. So pandas are basically for data manipulation, IBAPI to interact with the IBAPI server. We're going to execute this cell by pressing shift enter, and here you'll see a couple of error messages, and this is expected because we haven't installed packages yet in our virtual environment folder. So in order to install the packages, I'm just gonna go to the terminal again and do a pip install. I need IBAPI packages and I need a pandas packages. So just type in that and hit enter. This is going to install IBAPI and pandas into our virtual environment. Now let's go to the same cell again and then rerun the code. Now you shouldn't see any errors. Now after that, to successfully establish a connection to TWS and start receiving data, we need to define few variables from TWS. We need a host, port, and a client ID. All this information you can find in your TWS Trader Workstation. Just go to File, Global Configuration, API, and Settings. Host information, so we are only allowing host connection from localhost, so we need to use a localhost address. API, we have a maximum to 32, so any number less than 32 would be good for the client ID API. Socket port, this is the port number that we are going to be listening into, so we need to use 7496 as our default port to listen to the IB server. So let's just define those variables. So I'll define default host, and this is a string. So localhost address is 127.0.0.1, and then define a port that we are listening to. So as we've seen on the API settings, the port that we're listening to is 7496, and we also need to define a client ID, default client ID, and this is also going to be int. We have option until 32, so we can choose any number less than 32. So for now, I'll just choose 0. Let's run this cell again, and no error means we are all good. Now let's define a class for handling responses and data from our IB server called TradeApp. This TradeApp class is going to inherit from eWrapper and eClient. Let's define a constructor for this class and invoke eClient constructor inside our class. We will need two instance variables. The first one is data, which is an empty list to store our candle data in the format of OHLC, which is open, high, low, and close. Another instance variable is an event, which is going to thread the events so that it can handle multiple client connections to the IB server at the same time. Now let's define a function called historical data, which is going to append incoming bar data into the data list. We want to append and store open, high, low, volume, close, daytime in a dictionary format. So let's do that. Daytime, open, high, low, close, and volume. We want to store these in a dictionary format. And we also want to define a function called historical data end to release threads waiting on download to be completed. We'll set the event to signal that data download has been completed successfully. Let's correct that typo, event. Now we want to define a function that connects to the IV TWS API and requests historical data, given a contract symbol and contract month. So let's define a function called download historical data, pass symbol as a string, and contract date also as a string. Now initialize our TradeApp instance first. We'll need a WebSocket connection, so let's define a WebSocket connection for threading. App.run. In order to connect to IB WebSocket, first we need to feed in host, port, and client ID that was defined earlier. Let's do app.connect and pass in host equals default host that we defined earlier, port equals default port, client ID equals default client ID. Let's also define a multiple connection thread so that we can listen into multiple socket connection at the same time. This will speed up the process. This target equal WebSocket connection. And let's start the connection thread. Let's give it some time for connection to establish. So I'll do time.sleep1. Now that's all set up. Let's define a contract object. So I'll do contract equals contract object takes set of attributes. Now let's define attributes for our contract object. So first one is gonna be contract.symbol equals symbol. So we passed symbol as an argument. So this is going to take that from our function. Now let's define security type. There are different security types like stock, futures, forex. Here in our case, we're gonna be using futures, so FUT for the future. Let's set our currency as a USD, which is US dollars. We also need an exchange type. For futures, they are traded in CME exchange, so let's set our exchange to CME. Now, one last thing is contract last trade date or contract month. Let's provide the contract date. So this is also passed as an argument in our function. Now we are ready to request data from IB server and store it in our apps data list. So I'll do app.request historical data. Here we need to pass some attributes. First is request ID equals 0. Just set the request ID. And we need to pass contract, which we defined earlier. Let's define end time. If we leave it empty, it's going to default to the current time. Next up is duration string. So duration string is to define how far back data we want from the end date. Here in our case, we're going to be requesting 2 days worth of data, so 2D. We need to set the bar settings. Here, bar settings are basically your candle intervals. For our case, we're just going to use 3 minutes intervals. Next, define what to show. So here in our case, we are going to show trades transactions. So we only need OHLCV data. So we're going to set it up to trades. Now let's set use RTH. We are going to set 1 for regular hours. And if you want to set for non-regular hours, you will need to do 0. Let's also format the data in a nicer, cleaner way. Keep up to data. Let's set it to false because we will only be using historical data in this series. We won't use real-time data. If you want to use real-time data, you just need to set it out to true. Now that's all set up. Let's wait for data download to complete. So it's just app.event.wait. And we want to disconnect the app once the data is completed. So app.disconnect to disconnected. Now we want to use pandas data frame to manipulate our data. So let's convert our app data into a data frame. So let's do data frame equals pd.dataframe app.data. And then now let's return the data frame. Now let's invoke the function to test whether we're able to establish the connection and download the data. So we're going to do data frame equals call the function, download historical data, pass symbol as an ES and contract month as 2025 March. So this is going to download the March data for contract ES. Let's run this cell, hit shift enter. Okay, we have a type error from our constructor. Looks like we're missing arguments. Let's go ahead and fix that. And run it again. Okay, as you can see, the connection has been established. Now let's look at the first few rows to verify the data. Oh, okay, as you can see, we have data, we have daytime, open, high, L, low, close, and volume. Now let's save those data to our CSV locally so that we don't have to request it every time when we need the data. So just convert that to a CSV file and then hit shift enter. This will create a CSV file and store all the data that we downloaded in the CSV file. Now let's visualize all this data in our own chart. To visualize our data, we want to import lightweight chart library. So let's import lightweight charts and import Jupyter chart. So this error is expected because we haven't installed that library. So in order to install it, let's do pip install. Okay, so the library is installed. Let's import it again. This shouldn't give us any error this time. Now the chart package expects data in certain format. So let's modify our data for visualization. First, rename our columns. So our column is date time, so we need to rename it to just date. And the chart expects datetime object. So let's convert our datetime into a datetime object. Now let's initialize the chart. Chart equal Jupyter chart. Let's set the chart df. And then let's load our chart. So this loads our chart with the data, as you can see. And this is an interactive chart. You can zoom in, zoom out, scroll left, right. And this has all the data from March 3 that we requested till the current time. And that's it for today's video. We have successfully set up our trading environment, installed interactive broker trader workstation, configured the TWS API, and even pulled some historical data. If you followed along, you should now have solid foundation for connecting to IKBR and retrieving market data. This setup will be the backbone for our future videos, where we'll deep dive into algorithmic trading strategies. In the next videos, we are going to take things up a notch. We'll introduce key technical indicators, break down how they work, and code them into our charts. Once we have our indicators in place, we'll backtest some trading strategies hands-on to see which ones perform best in different market conditions. So make sure you don't miss out. If you found this video helpful, do us a favor, like the video to support the channel, share it with others who might find it useful. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified when we drop the next episode. Also, let us know in the comment below what indicators or strategies you'd like us to cover in future videos. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, happy coding and happy trading. See you in the next one.